The Burlington 8 incident, which took place in 1980, that was a result of one action, which was a group of youth actually towed a police car while it was stationary. There was no officers in it, they were actually drinking in a pub. The Burlington is a place where the youth hang out as a matter of course, and they stay there, they converse. It's used by the elder community as well. It's not just youth who use it. And the youth wrecked the police car, but that was only a culmination of a series of incidents that took place in the Highfields, because there was a lot of stop and searches, and a lot of youths were getting arrested from about January. They were getting actually fed up with people being picked up for no apparent reason. Women getting stopped on the street with their babies and arrested and taken to the police station without any formal charges made against them. In the early 60s, when I first came here, right, there was a lot of West Indian people from Antigua, Dominica, St. Lucia, who were actually bringing their children over to this country to get what they called a system of education. What we did find is that even talking in the schoolyards amongst ourselves as youth, right, that the education that you got in terms of education was nothing that we could actually relate to in that sense. And books have been written about it where they talk about sin bins. And when we look back at the system, we actually found that going through the school system from about 9, which was the average age which the youth came at, to 15, is that when it came to leaving school actually, and to actually get a job and employment, you not only face the employer, you not only face the Youth Employment Bureau, but you also face what you call the careers teacher. Now that man would do his best that if a youth wanted to be an electrician, for instance, and he wanted an apprenticeship, he wouldn't get that apprenticeship, but he would get shunted into a shoe factory. He'd be packing shoes, for instance. If he wanted to be a mechanic, he would try desperately to actually get some kind of interview somewhere. But then he'd find himself working in the printers. And a lot of the youth that actually came out of our environment within our school system is like they actually missed out, if you like, on the kind of career that they wanted to carry out. Well, in the late 60s, just after the period when they had the Martin Luther King era and the George Jackson era, Leicester in particular was affected by that kind of movement, where we had not the Black Power movement, but the Black People's Liberation Party. There was produced the first black magazine, Black Chat, that was available to black people in Leicester. Now, they had a very American brand of black power, if you like.
And basically what we were saying is justice for black people, you know, justice in education, in housing, in welfare, in health, in politics, in social aspect. All those things were relevant, you know. When they came to the building, they didn't knock on the door or ring the bell or whatever. They used an axe. One at the back door, one at the front door, and they had axe. The charge was being in possession of ganja, and that we were selling drinks for gain. We was running blues parties, you know, what they call blues parties, selling drinks and food and using the money to print materials, you know, and buying duplicators and typewriters and papers and things like that.
After a 3-4 year period of lapse, there was no activity. The Ethiopian World Federation came. This was a movement which was Rasta dominated, if you like. And the whole emphasis was not politics as such, but cultural identity and diversity in that sense. And the youth began to look more towards the African continent for vision rather than to America in that. And it continued into the 80s when the bookshop developed. Well, Raddles is a kind of a bookshop which originated as a stall in polytechnics, schools and colleges. We used to go around and sell books until we were approached by City Council, who had an in-area program fund which was available for developing projects, one of which they envisaged would be a bookshop. When we actually got together, it was throwing in £2 a week each, and that went towards fundraising. dance or anything that we could do to actually fundraise to get the project or to get the idea of books off the ground. And in that way, we were successful in that we accumulated a good amount of money that we could actually go down to places like London, Birmingham, to visit existing bookshops, to actually get contacts. There were 7 of us, and most of us were unemployed at that time. And to actually get and accumulate money to actually run a shop proper, it would take us a very long time. And not only that, we had ideas other than just selling books, i.e. to get a program where people can actually come to learn about their backgrounds and their origins. So basically we learned our organising through experience from the older days, but also we moved into a different era when we started selling books. In 1979, Leicester witnessed one of the biggest demonstrations of National Front activity and anti-Nancy League and work against racism. They had a march in that year, and after that march, there seemed to be a significant increase in the activity. For instance, temples and mosques in the area were graffitied with National Front slogans and Ku Klux Klan slogans. People were actually being brutalized on the street by groups of skinheads. And it wasn't until we started hitting back, if you like, that the activity ceased. Hitting back not only at the fascists, but also hitting back in the legal sense, that we were actually organising to defend ourselves in terms of what goes on in the courts, and really got to grips with that kind of situation. In saying that we did organise together, I think it was something new, especially in Leicester, that Asians and Caribbean people were actually organising on one level or another to defend their communities and to defend themselves. And that they were hitting back at a state, not only at the state, but at the fascists as well, who were actually working in the areas trying to destroy their communities. On the national scale, for instance, last year we had a series of incidents even before the summer. One of them was the New Cross fire, and the other was a series of incidents in places like Wolde Selassie and Brick Lane, where people were actually getting their houses burned. And this happened to both communities. I think that done something to cement the feeling between the two communities. The uprisings, I don't think you could isolate it to Leicester, but Leicester was affected by last year's events in every sense of the word, that there was 3 nights of rioting in the town. Looking back at it, we always said that it was the police who actually planned the riots, as far as we were concerned, that there was no riot going to happen in Leicester, because we didn't know about it as a black community, but it was going around that there was going to be a riot. There was an increased level of police activity anyway. There were people getting stopped on the street, the usual pattern, and it was increasing. But we did find there was a lot of white youth as well, not just from the Highfields area, but from the surrounding estates.